Okay, welcome everyone. Tonight we're gonna speak about Al Hanisim. So we'll go through the text and speak about Al Hanisim, maybe compare it a little bit to the Al Hanisim that we say on Purim, and also discuss. There's some famous questions about the Al Hanisim that we say on Chanukah. So before we begin discussing the actual text, just to very quickly, briefly mention the halacha that, right, if you forget to say Al Hanisim, you do not repeat Al Hanisim. If you remember before you say the name of Hashem in the bracha, you can go back to Al Hanisim and say it. But once you say Hashem's name, you shouldn't go back. But the Mishnah Berurah does write, though, that if you remember before you finished saying your entire Shemona Esrei, then you can put it in Elokai or in the form of a Harachaman that you would say at the end of benching. You can put that in right before you say right before you take your 3 steps back. So that is the halacha. The Mishnah Berurah also writes, though, that he says mentioning Al Hanisim on Chanukah is very different from other times in Tefillah where we have these insertions for the holiday or for Rosh Chodesh. It's very different. How so? He says that because this is at all other points in Tefillah when we have these insertions, it's okay. You have an obligation to say it during time of the year, right? Whenever time it is, that's when you say it. But it says Al Hanisim is something else. It's something different. He says etzem takanas hayom, that part and parcel of the establishment of the day of Chanukah is lefarsume nisa b'chiyav hodah, to publicize the miracle and the obligation to give thanks to Kadosh Baruch Hu. And by saying Al Hanisim, we're fulfilling that obligation. We're fulfilling that. We're being mekayim the parsume nisa and publicizing the miracle. And so it's different than all, like when we say Yalav V'Yalav, for example, for Rosh Chodesh, is very different. Simply by saying the Al Hanisim, we're being mekayim the actual mitzvahs, some of the mitzvahs of Chanukah. So that is definitely something to keep in mind as we say this tefillah. So now let's take a few moments and go through the words, make sure we understand anything, and then we'll address some of the questions that are there. So the tefillah starts with Al Hanisim. We say the same thing on Purim. Al Hanisim ve'al Porkan ve'al Gvuros ve'al Shuos ve'al Melchamos she'asita la v'oseinim b'yamim hahim b'zman hazeh. So there's a debate among different poskim whether we should include above here. Do we say ve'al Hanisim or do we say just Al Hanisim? So some sitters you'll have above, and some sitters it'll just start by saying Al Hanisim. And I think most of the early sources don't include the vav, but the Mishnah Berurah writes that it's a continuation of modim, meaning we've just been saying modim, we've been thinking of Kadosh Baruch Hu for various things, and so this is a continuation by saying thank you for the nisim and the porkan, which will explain what it is, and therefore you should say a vav. It's a continuation. Vav means and. So with the Mishnah Berurah's understanding, it's and for the nisim, the miracles, the porkan, salvation, viros, mighty deeds, chuos, victories, ve'al melchamos, in the battles, shasisa lavuseinu, that you performed for our fathers, by yamim hahim bezman hazeh. So how would you translate the words by yamim hahim bezman hazeh? What would you think? So there's different ways to go about it, but I would have thought it means this. I would have thought by yamim hahim bezman hazeh means that happened in those days, and to us bazman hazeh, and nowadays too. I mean, it happened for them, and it's also happening for us, and that's how the Lavush understands by yamim hahim bezman hazeh, that we're praising Kadosh Baruch for the miracles that occurred in the times of Chanukah back then, and also for the miracles that are happening for us, that are being performed for us every day. It may not be the same. It may not be as great and obvious of a miracle that hits you in the face, but it's also for the Hanisim that happen to us every single day. But there's another approach also. You can pick what you like better. But the approach of the eighth Yosef says that no, it means in Bayamim Ahim, in those days, Bazman is at this time, meaning God performed these miracles for our ancestors around this time, meaning the days of Chanukah, and every single year at this time, we're sort of tapping into that fact that this is the time of the year that Kadosh Baruch Hu did these miracles, and there's a significance to the date of a miracle. Is the Medrash shows that God visits the place of each miracle every year on the date that it occurred, and so that's why that's what we're alluding to when we say Vayamim Ahim Bazman Hazeh. So I like the first approach better, but
we did in the yeshiva on Shabbos. The Aruch HaShulchan says it means Vayamim Ahim Bazman Hazeh, in those days leading up to the holiday of Chanukah, in the days of the battle, and then also the Bazman Hazeh, the miracle of the oil. That's what the Aruch HaShulchan says.
Say it again. Bayamim Ahim refers to
the days leading up to the 25th of Kislev, the days of the battle, and then Bazman Hazeh is the miracle of the oil.
Beautiful. So there's three different. So we have three different approaches of how to understand Bayamim Ahim Bazman Hazeh. Okay, very nice. Okay, so the next line continues. Bimei Matisyahu ben Yochanan Kohen Gadol Hashmonai Vanav Shamdam Malchus Yavan Harishal Mcha Yisrael Ashkicham Teresecha Ulhaviram Michuker Tunecha. So in the days of Matisyahu, son of Yochanan the Kohen Gadol, Hashmonai and his sons, when the Greek kingdom Malchus Yavan, when they rose up against Israel, why? Lashkicham Teresecha Ulhaviram Michuker Tunecha. To make them forget your Torah and to make them stray from the laws of your will. So that's kind of striking that it says straight on that the goal of the persecution was by the Greeks was to make us try to forget the Torah. And Rav Hirsch comments on this. He says that the Greeks, why did they focus? Why was that their goal? So the Greeks focused on causing the Jews to forget the Torah because they understood that the study of Torah is the basis of the Jewish religion. Talmud Torah is the core of Judaism. And if Torah study was to be neglected, then the decline of keeping the mitzvos would be inevitable. Once you lose the Torah study, everything else is also going to come falling through. And I think that's a very appropriate message, especially for yeshiva to keep in mind that, we strengthen ourselves. It all comes from the studying of Torah. And by studying the Torah, everything else is a result of that. And that's really what, the Greeks understood. And that's why they wanted to, that was their goal. They wanted to specifically uproot the study of Torah. And with that, they believed that Judaism would no longer exist. And so on Hanukkah, we kind of have to realize and, double down, focus more on the study of Torah, because if that's what would bring us down, then for sure that's also what's holding us up. Okay. Then the next line continues. V'atal b'rachamecha harabim amar talem b'yitzarasam rav ta'es rivam don ta'es dinam nakam ta'es nikmasam. But you, meaning you, God, b'rachamecha harabim, in your mercy, amar talem b'yitzarasam, you stood up for them in their time of distress. Rav ta'es rivam, you championed their cause. Don ta'es dinam, you judged their claim. Nakam ta'es nikmasam, you avenged their wrong. And the next line continues, Masarta giborim biyad chalashim, you delivered the strong into the hands of the weak, Rabim biyad me'atim, and the many in the hands of the few. Tmeim biyad tehorim, the impure into the hands of the pure. Risham biyad tzadikim, the wicked into the hands of the righteous. V'zeidim biyad oske torasecha, and the will for sinners into the hands of those who study your Torah. So, two comments here. That one is idea from Rabbi Nachum Genak. He understands that he understands that Rishon Biyad Tzadikim. Why is that necessarily such a miracle that the evil are going to be handed to the holy people? Okay, it could happen. So he understands that a Rasha fights. When a Rasha fights, he fights dirty, and he's okay taking innocent casualties, or if he does what he needs to do to win. But tzaddikim, even in war, they understand there needs to be a level of dignity and morality. So for tzaddikim to beat those for Rishaim and fight with no moral ground, that is going to be a miracle every single time. And that's what we need to realize when we say Rishaim via tzaddikim. Okay, and another idea, this is from my Rabbi Aryeh Leibowitz. So he said, I don't understand. He says, we seem to be repeating the same general thing over and over again, right? We said, Tmeim biyad tehorim, that those who are impure in the hands of who are pure. Rishon biyad tzadikim, evil in the hands of the righteous. Zaydim, those who sin, biyad oske torasecha, to the hands of those who study your Torah. It's repetitive. Is there a difference between them? What's the point? So he thought to explain the three of them, these three miracles as follows. It says Tmeim biyad tehorim. That means what you would expect it to mean. It means non-Jews. The Tmeim are those who are not Jewish, and the Greeks in this case. Verse biyad tehorim. Verse the Torim, the Jews of that time. And a Jew, we know, is Torah. It says Elokai neshama tehorahi. The neshama of a Jew is Torah. And so that was the first miracle that the Jews, they won against the hands of the Greeks. Okay, the next phrase, Rishaim biyad tzadikim, he's saying is even within the Jewish people at that time, because there are some people who believed, right, and they believed in a Kadosh Baruch Hu, they're the tzadikim, and then there's some who stopped believing, right? And this is a different battle from the Jews versus the Greeks. It's the Jews versus the other Jews who maybe were convinced by the Greeks and who didn't believe so much in God anymore. And these tzaddikim had to be vindicated from those who didn't believe, and that too was a miracle. And then finally he says, "V'zeidim biyad oske torasecha." He says that may even be within the same person, meaning the battle, the internal battle that we have. Sometimes we behave like ourselves, right? And we behave as we want to. And sometimes we lose ourselves and we give into our impulse and we spend times on things that aren't always so valuable. And he gave a beautiful mashal that he heard from Rabbi Ephraim Waxman. He said that so a guy, he finds treasure and he's so excited. He found this beautiful treasure. And so, but the problem is it's too big for him to carry on his own. So he's like, okay, fine. I have this treasure. I'm going to go look for someone to help me carry this treasure. So he sees a guy. This guy is leaning against a building, smoking a cigarette. Says, listen, I found this big treasure, split it in half, help me carry it, help me pick it up. And the guy's not interested. He says, I'm okay. I'm busy. I'm holding up this building, making sure it's not gonna fall. And he's like, looks at him, he's like, okay, this guy's crazy. He doesn't, what does he think? He's holding up this building? He's okay, I'll look for someone else. So goes, looks for someone else, and he sees a guy who's by the ocean, by the water. And he says, he says, okay, listen, I found this treasure, help me. And the guy says, no, I'm blowing to make sure that the waves don't come onto the ground, come onto the land and flood the land. And he looks at him and says, okay, this guy is even crazier than the other guy. So he looks for a third guy, and sees the guy on the bench, explains to him the situation. The guy on the bench is counting these numbers, and he says, can't help you. Why? I'm counting the raindrops. Okay, so Rabbi Ephraim Waxman, he says, okay, which guy do you think is the most crazy out of all the guys? So he says that the third guy is the most craziest. He's the most meshuggah of all of them. Why? Because the first two guys, at least they thought they were doing something. What they believed to be doing wasn't actually true. But if it had been true, it served a purpose. They were accomplishing something. They were spending their time on something that at least if it was true, it would be rational to spend one time on. But the guy who's counting the raindrops, for what purpose? What's he going to get out of counting the raindrops? So he said that's exactly the challenge of this generation, is that we spend so much time on useless things, on wasting our time and trying to rationalize that what we're doing actually makes sense and is logical and is good use of our time. And that is what Zaydim Biadas Oske Torasecha means, is that the miracle that we have and we continue to have an inner battle that we have to fight with ourselves. And the Chanukah miracle is that they were able to win that battle, and that hopefully through us celebrating Chanukah will give us the kochos to also continue to win that battle, that internal battle. Okay, so let's continue. For yourself, you made a name that is great and holy in your world, and for your people Israel, you performed a miracle of great magnitude and a salvation to this day. And Chazal many times explain that Kayom Hazeh, right, when we finished Furqan, Kayom Hazeh, that it's an expression used to show unquestionable clarity that this miracle was so great and obvious as if it as this day that we have here today. That's how clear the miracle was. And then finally, V'achar came ba'u v'necha lidvir beisecha ufinu eseichalecha v'tiharus mitashecha v'hidliku neros v'chaters kochecha v'kavu shmona simei Chanukah ilu lehodos v'halal shemcha gadol. Afterwards, your children came to the Holy of Holies in your house. They cleaned your temple, purified your sanctuary, and lit candles in the courtyards of your sanctuary. They established 8 days of Hanukkah to express thanks and praise to your name. That is great. And so 2 points here, that first of all, the Chafetz Chaim says that on this sentence over here, that by the actions that these Jews did after their success in battle, Jews proved that they weren't so interested. I mean, of course, they were interested in winning the battle, but it wasn't winning the military battle in and of itself that was important to them, or political power that they would get from winning the battle, but rather, right, their actions here show that it was all important to them because service of Hashem, and that's really what they wanted, and that's exactly what they did as soon as they won, which shows that's what they were really interested in. Also, Rabbi Bernie Katz, so I listened to him a little bit. We're going to discuss his point in just a few moments, but he understands that the likud neros b'chatzeres kojecha is not a reference to lighting the menorah. He says, and it's not a reference to the miracle of the oil, because that was never done in the lighting the oil was of the menorah. That was never done in the Chatzar. He says this means that they were lighting the candles in celebration of the miracle. And that's important. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because many ask, they on this tefillah, they say, how come we seem to focus or not even mention the miracle of the oil, and we only mention the miracle of the war? That's the famous question that people ask on this. Why? How come we leave out the miracle of the oil? So I have a few answers here, but I'm sure there are many, many answers. If anyone has heard an answer, please share. Okay, fine. So, or if you think of an answer, in the middle, that's also good. But I'll share with you three answers. So, first from Moshe Feinstein, he says that the reason why we don't mention the miracle of the oil is because that would limit our thanks to only the supernatural, because the miracle of the oil was clearly something that was supernatural. We want to thank Hashem even for the natural, and to mention the fact that this miracle of the oil would kind of show that we only are thanking Hashem because it was this super great miracle. But we say no, even just the fact that there was this miracle, that we were able to light the Neiros in the Chatzer regularly, that's also something that we thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for. That's one answer. Okay, another answer is from the Maharal, and he says that really that the miracle of the war is the true miracle of Chanukah, and the miracle of the oil was just to indicate, was just a sign that showed us that really the miracle of the war was also done by Hashem. It was just, but it's really the miracle that we care about is the miracle of the battle. That's why that's the only miracle that we mention. Okay. And then another answer from Rav Soloveitchik, he says that it's just, he says this is just a function of how we're supposed to thank God, a function of modim, that all the things that we say thank you to Kadosh Baruch Hu in this tefillah modim is about physical things, but the miracle of the oil is a spiritual thing. We don't thank Hashem for spiritual things in the tefillah of modim. We can say it in Hanir Shalalu, for example, but in modim we only thank Kadosh Baruch Hu for the physical things. That's why we don't mention it here. Okay, these three answers. I think there's still more out there. Maybe there could be a more satisfactory answer, but this is all I found so far. But I think many ask this question and try to find an answer for this question. And then finally, just to one more question to discuss, which is from Rabbi Bernie Katz, which he discussed. He says that the question that they always used to ask for him, and when he was young, is how come this it's a funny question, but he says, how come the Hanisim for Purim is how come the Hanisim for Chanukah is so much longer than the Hanisim for Purim? That's the question they used to ask. It's much longer. Takes longer to say. Why is it so long? So he had an interesting chiddush, I think. He said that the two tefillahs are kind of composed a little bit differently. That in the Hanisim for Purim, it sort of describes the crisis, and then it describes the way they were saved from the crisis. There's really two sections, and if we had more time, we would be able to look at it and really develop his point. But says that's the structure of the Hanisim for Purim. But the Hanisim for Chanukah is made up of many more parts. First, it describes the victory, and then the fact that good triumphs over evil. Then we mentioned that it was all done to be Mekadosh the name of Hashem. And then we discuss how did that impact the Jews, right? What do they do afterwards? And then we say, okay, then they created the holiday of Hanukkah. So how come there's this difference? And really, why do we have why is Al Hanisim for Hanukkah so much bigger? So he says the miracle of Purim was about being happy to be alive. It was just, our threat, the Judaism was challenged. There was an existential threat, and the fact that we are saved was a miracle. And so that's all we need to talk about here. But Hanukkah's miracle, the miracle of Hanukkah is a little bit different. It's a miracle that hits you in the face, as opposed to the miracle of Purim, which is a hidden miracle. It's Hanukkah's miracle is this huge miracle that you see. It was a Kiddush Hashem, and part of that Kiddush Hashem, it's important to express and understand how the Jews responded to this miracle. Just for them to just win, for us to just say, okay, they won this battle is not enough. We have to say, okay, what did they do as a result of this battle? How was it a Kiddush Hashem? Oh, because they went back to the base of Mikdash and they made this holiday of Chanukah. And that's why we have all these details in the Hanisim. Okay, and so just to summarize, that we discussed a little bit the halachas, and then I think the main point that to sort of walk away from is that really that the Hanisim is more than just a tefillah, but it's also just, I think what we started with the Mishnah Berurah, that it's more than just a tefillah. It kind of relates to the idea that we spoke about at the end from Rabbi Bernie Katz, that it's this Kiddush Hashem, and part of that is Parsumei Nis, and that's why it's so important that we say it on Hanukkah. We'll stop here. Does anyone have any questions?